Good evening, Mason Nation, and welcome to the Courtside Seats preseason show. I'm Cody Norman, my co-host Daniel Zimmet. We will be joining you live here on Mason Cable Network and courtsideseats.onmason.com all season long. Make sure you follow along with us on Twitter at Mason_Courtside. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/MasonCourtside. Let's jump right into our first segment, off-season activity. A very productive, maybe counterproductive.
Yeah, it depends on how you look at it.
Off-season for the Colonial Athletic Association. We're losing Virginia Commonwealth University, one of our longtime rivals, one of the powerhouses of the CAA for the last several years. VCU made the move to the A-10, a move that Mason decided was not in our best interest. Old Dominion and Georgia State both on their way out. Both of those teams, Old Dominion to Conference USA, Georgia State to the Southern Conference. Both of those teams ineligible for postseason play this season. And Towson and UNC Wilmington, both of those teams as well, academically ineligible, not available in conference play. Our conference tournament sunk from 12 teams to 7 in one offseason.
You're absolutely right. And just running down the conference now, you would think Mason's got to be one of the powerhouses to look at in the CAA this year. Let's take a look at the roster real quick. Couple key points. We have no true seniors on the team, aside from Bryce Lewis, who was a walk-on last year. We have 4 players with starting experience so far. Vertrell Vaughns, Corey Edwards, Brian Allen, and Sherrod Wright. Now, Brian Allen and Corey Edwards kind of went back and forth depending on which game you were at the point guard position. And finally, Sherrod Wright, who we all know for that great shot against VCU at the Patriots Center, unbelievable win, was a preseason second-team player in the CAA. And I think that really surprised both of us that that's the only player that got an honor.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when you look at up and down our roster, a roster that's stacked with guys like Eric Copes, John Arledge, Vaughn Gray, the list goes on. Vertrell Vaughns, we can sit here and name guys all night long. The fact that Sherrod is the only guy mentioned in the preseason is shocking.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the freshmen real quick. First, we have Marko Gujanic, an incredible player we saw in the first game. Had 16 points in 24 minutes, which was a team high in points, and was 8 for 11 for shooting. An unbelievable guy, and later in the show we're going to talk about if he possibly is the most game-ready freshman we've ever seen here at Mason.
Yeah, and a guy in Patrick Holloway did not enjoy quite as much success in game number 1, but I assure you, All-Met Player of the Year right down the road at Paul VI. Patrick Holloway is a pure shooter. The kid can shoot from the perimeter, probably one of the best, along with Vertrell Vaughns that we have on our team, potentially even in the league this season. The kid can shoot. We've talked about this kid too. Vertrell Vaughns, to a bunch of these guys in the offseason, and that's the first thing that comes to mind. The kid can shoot the
Absolutely.
basketball.
I mean, we saw him play at Paul VI.
We did.
And all we kept talking about was how he just stood outside the three-point line and just kept knocking him down. Hopefully, as he develops here, Mason will be able to handle the ball a little more and develop that way.
Yeah, this is, you mentioned Paul VI. This is a guy that I went to school with. His freshman year, my senior year. I used to joke and tell him that I could shoot the ball better than him, but
we all know that's not true.
I can say that. I just can't go out and do it at this point.
Exactly.
And lastly, a guy recruited out of or from Marquette rather, recruited by Marquette, recruited by Providence, two high major schools.
Absolutely.
6'7" swingman from the Bronx, Jalen Jenkins. He'll redshirt this season, but this kid is going to be a force.
Yeah, he will be absolutely a great player moving forward, and we're lucky to be able to land him and redshirt him and keep him really for an extra year moving forward.
Yeah, well, he was a guy who was not quite sure whether or not he wanted to go to prep school right out of high school, or if he wanted to go right into college. Thankfully, he chose Mason. He's getting a chance to prep at Mason before he gets a chance to get on the floor with the Patriots next season.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break here, but later in the show, Cody and I are going to give you our 3 points to success this season. You're not going to want to miss that. Stick around. Welcome back to the Courtside Seats preseason show here on Mason Cable Network, or if you're watching from the Courtside Seats website. Daniel Zimmet joined with Cody Norman here. Cody, let's talk about a preview of the team this year. We mentioned a little earlier in the last segment that if Marko is the most game-ready freshman that we've ever seen here at Mason.
Judging by game 1, You know, and I realize that's a small sample size, but judging by game one, I say yes. I really think that Marco, judging by the 16 points in 24 minutes against Bowie State, the kid can flat out play. He's 6'8" from Serbia. Coach Hewitt brought up a great point after the game was over. That this kid has not played a meaningless game.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's played games for his country. He's played, in prep school in the States. He can do it all.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And not to take anything away from Marco, he had a fantastic game. But really, when I think of great freshmen, the person that comes to mind is Luke Hancock. I really felt like the second he got here, the game really slowed down for him, and he really ran the tempo of the game. He had the trifecta in my mind. He could dribble, he could shoot, and we really saw that against Villanova at the Q in Cleveland in the NCAA tournament. But really what I remember him for is his ability to drive. And every time he drove to the basket, anything could have happened. He could have gotten an and one, some acrobatic where he threw it over the back of his head. That's who I really think about when I think of most game-ready freshmen here at Mason.
I'm going to go all Coach Cody on you here for a minute. But to me, the most important thing about a freshman, especially about a guy like Marco can rebound the basketball. He's 6 feet 8 inches. So he can get into the post. He's a big, strong kid. Can get in there and rebound. He's a heck of a defender.
Absolutely, yeah.
They had him playing really that point position in their press. He's again 6 feet 8 inches. A guy that's long, a guy that's athletic, and a guy that can shoot the basketball. He plays that European style of basketball, not just a big, tall, strong kid that can hang around the perimeter and shoot the basketball. He's a guy who can drive. He can get to the basket. He gets those really garbage buckets down underneath the basket, and he's got those really European, the Anderson Varejao type of plays where he kind of gets into your skin and pokes you a little bit.
And that's exactly what we want from a player here, Mason. And this is kind of a good little tiff to have it that we have two unbelievable guys that we got to see here, as freshmen. Yeah. And you mentioned it's that European style, right, where really anything can happen at any time. Those huge guys that can shoot the three from anywhere around the court.
That's one thing I'm looking forward to is the unexpected.
Absolutely, that's going to be so much fun to watch this season. Talking about handling the ball, who do you think is going to start at point guard this year? Is it going to be Corey Edwards or Brian Allen?
I really I do like Brian Allen. I think Brian Allen certainly has a really good place on this team. He's a guy who can get to the rim. He's a guy who has developed a pretty decent shot in the 2 years that he's been here.
Right.
However, I think Corey Edwards is the point guard that this team needs. Coach Hewitt likes to get up and down the floor. He likes to really push the basketball. He likes point guards who don't mind getting up in somebody to play defense. And to me, that's Corey Edwards. He's that true point guard. He's a distributor first. In game one, you look at game one, he probably had 2 points. Maybe shot the ball 2 or 3 times. He's a guy who doesn't go out there and shoot the ball too terribly much. Goes out and plays good defense. Goes out and distributes the basketball, and plays a role on this team.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think a big thing that happened last year was really both point guards got kind of thrown into the fire.
Right.
Corey especially, I felt like, because he was really coming off of not seeing any action at all.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that you mentioned is his ability to pass the ball. I think he sees the court better than any player we have on this team. Guys cutting, guys slashers, like I hope to see Vaughn Gray do this year, some more, maybe Vertrail Vaughns as well.
Right.
I'm going to have to agree that I think Corey should be the starter this year. You also mentioned his defense. Unbelievably quick hands. He was team high in steals in this past preseason game, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it this year as well.
Yeah, and we don't want to take anything away from Brian Allen, because Brian Allen certainly is a guy who can score in bunches. We saw that in the game that we won last season in the CAA tournament. In the first round for us, second round of the tournament, he scored, really made a difficult shot look easy.
I think you're right, and I think really the discussion, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
It's a good problem to have a guy like Corey who can pass the ball, who can be quick with the hands and steal, but also Brian, who if you put him in there for any 10 to 15 minutes, he can get hot and score 10 points in that amount of time.
Yeah.
So really, starting for this team at point guard is not as much of a big deal as who's really going to step up to the level.
Right. And certainly if depth is a problem. That is a good problem that Coach Hewitt has this season. And aside from ball handling, we have a front court of Eric Copes, of John Arledge, of Johnny Williams, and Marko Giannichik, who we've mentioned. How does that front court mesh together?
Well, I think obviously you first got to look at Block Party. Eric Block Party Copes is gonna be the guy to watch this year, without a doubt. I mean, his uncle Roland Houston teaching big men. I mean, a highly recruited guy. We saw him last year. Had a little bit of a hip injury, so I don't think we got to see his full potential. But he's back. We talked to him way before Mason Madness, and he's ready to go. So I think he's the guy to watch. But the way that they're gonna mesh, I think, is very important. You have John Arledge, who can definitely shoot the ball, and he's left-handed, as well as Johnny Williams as well. So to be able to have that kind of lefty-righty matchup from guys that can shoot inside and outside is a big advantage to have. The second thing is J2 or Johnny Williams lost a lot of weight this offseason.
Yeah.
If he can be a dominant force down low, kind of push some guys around, no fouls. We don't need to rack the fouls up. But if he can be a dominant guy down low and get those boards, I think our front court is going to have a lot of success.
You mentioned a guy in Eric Copes who last season really didn't get a whole lot of playing time when he's playing behind Ryan Pearson and Mike Morrison. Right. But one thing that Mike kept saying all year last year is that the reason he really took his game to the next level last season was because he's playing against a guy like Eric Copes. So that's what I'm looking at out of John Arledge and Johnny Williams, two guys, as you mentioned, they can shoot the basketball. There's no denying that. Johnny Williams knocked down a three at the buzzer in the last game. Johnny Williams can shoot. John Arledge can shoot. But what we're interested in out of those guys is, can they play around the basket? Yep. And I think practicing with Eric Copes, nobody wants to take an elbow from Eric. No.
And John Arledge started wearing those double elbow pads like we used to see Ryan Pearson or Mike Morrison wear last year. Yep. And he said, for that reason, I don't want to be down there, with Eric. He's going to push me around. I need to have the protection. He's got this whole rib cage thing going on as well for that extra protection. So you're absolutely right. I think that's a big key. And the depth you mentioned is great, but we really need someone, I think, at least to step up. We had Mike Morrison last year. We had Ryan Pearson. I think those two guys prove that they were the captains of this team.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the court, off the court, whenever we talked to them in the locker room, they always got guys up. When they were down, they picked them up or they kept them up. Who do you think is going to really step up as a captain and a leader of this team?
You know what? To me, it's not about really leadership. I don't want to say on the floor, but as far as play, I think there's a lot of guys on this team who can step up and really lead by example. What I want to look at is who on this team. Mike Morrison, Ryan Pearson, both of those guys, not only were they excellent leaders, both of those guys extremely emotional players.
Right, wore it all in their sleeve.
We don't really see that out of any of these guys, especially the John Arledge, Johnny Williams. There's Vaughn Gray, Latrell Vaughns. None of those guys are really emotional basketball players. So the one key guy that I'm really looking at is a guy who you've already mentioned in Eric Copes. At just a sophomore, I think Eric is extremely mature. He has played in practice under Coach Roland Houston. He's somebody who really acts to me as a coach out on the floor, but he's also an extremely emotional player, which I think you need in a high tempo offense. Somebody that will really go out there and inspire through his emotions.
Yeah, I'm normally a big fan of having one specific or two specific players being a captain, but I think this year, because as we mentioned, there's no true seniors that have been there the whole run. Right. I think we need to go captain by committee or leader by committee, and whoever's hot, whoever's in the mood to get everyone up. I mean, you mentioned Ryan and Mike were emotional players, which is good. Yeah. It's a great quality to have, but I think when they have emotions that are low, it can bring the rest of the guys down. Yeah. So I think that by having a bunch of different guys be able to step up as leaders, I think that'll really help everyone get up when we need to get up.
Certainly, but from an emotional standpoint, or rather from a playing standpoint, we have some really intelligent guys on this team who are capable of leading. You look at Johnny Williams, at Latrell Vaughns. I mentioned Eric Copes. Especially Johnny and Latrell. Those two guys are really extremely intelligent guys. not taking anything away from the rest of these guys, but
Right.
but those two guys in particular, just from my interaction with them, those two guys are extremely good leaders in my mind.
I think you're absolutely right. We're going to take a quick break right now. We still have the out-of-conference schedule we're going to review, and Cody and I are still going to give you our 3 keys to success this season, so make sure you stick around from that. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Courtside Seats preseason show here on Mason Cable Network, or if you're watching on the Courtside Seats website. Cody, Norman, Daniel, Zimmet. Cody, let's jump right into the out-of-conference schedule. We have University of Virginia at the Patriots Center, season opener, home opener coming up.
Chills.
You did, right? Coming up this Friday. University of Maryland at the Verizon Center coming up. We have South Florida, Rhode Island, Bucknell, Richmond at the Coliseum. We don't love playing in the Coliseum, but we're happy to go there anyway for an out-of-conference matchup. And then we have a tournament in the Virgin Islands, which is going to be phenomenal out-of-conference teams. What is the out-of-conference schedule like to you, you think, this year, and how much does it mean to this team?
I think the first thing that we need to address is the last one that you mentioned, is the Virgin Islands. And from not really from an NCAA tournament standpoint, but think back a couple years ago when our team went to, was it Italy?
Mm-hmm.
When we went to Italy, that was a team that bonded together by making that trip together. They're together 24 hours a day for a week or 2 weeks or however long they were over there, and that really, I think, brought that team together.
Right.
And keep in mind, that's also the last time we made the NCAA tournament. It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, the Virgin Islands is important for reasons outside of really making the NCAA tournament or your conference schedule or anything like that. I think that the Virgin Islands is the most important part of this out of conference schedule.
I agree that the Virgin Islands is going to be a phenomenal aspect for this team this year. I think on the court, playing out of your element, and I understand that playing in away games is also out of your element, but I think playing in the Virgin Islands, where you have to fly far away, and you're going to see teams that you're probably never going to see for the rest of your college experience, is a huge benefit for us this year. And it gives, I think, Coach Paul Hewitt a good advantage to kind of take advantage of, to be able to coach against those teams that we may not see. But the biggest one for me on this list is University of Virginia. Season opener, home opener. We played them last year at University of Virginia. Yep. We lost by 20 points in the end. But to be able to have a home-away matchup with them is huge for our RPI.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's one thing that, aside from basketball, that Coach Hewitt brings to this program is he has those connections with the ACC, so he's able to bring in schools like Virginia. He's able to schedule teams like Maryland, in the Verizon Center. He's able to make those adjustments and really give us a much higher RPI, despite the fact that we're losing teams like VCU this season. Mentioning VCU, I think the reason basketball-wise, that this out-of-conference schedule is really, really pertinent for us, is because of that. Because we're missing VCU, we're missing ODU, we're going to be missing, Georgia State, UNCW, Towson, all those teams in our conference tournament. Winning a 17 tournament at the end of the season really doesn't look that impressive.
Right, absolutely.
And especially coming in second in a 17 tournament.
It's even worse.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not one of those things where, last season Drexel came in second place, and despite their phenomenal season, really, a record-breaking season for that program, they didn't make it to the NCAA tournament. And that was second out of 12 teams in the conference tournament, really number one going in.
And what you'd think, we thought they were a lock.
Right.
I think the whole CAA thought they were a lock.
Right.
And obviously, as you mentioned, they weren't, and they didn't wipe through the NIT, but I think they at least proved that they had a bid to be in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that you're looking at the UVA game coming up on this Friday. They were 22-10 overall last season, number 10 seed in the NCAA tournament. Do you think their success last season has a lot of effect on us playing them this season, or is it kind of like a clean slate? It's UVA, George Mason, open the season.
I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure it has any sort of carryover from last season, aside from the fact that the guys that we have on this team really want to take it to UVA because they did lose by 20.
Right.
But really, UVA losing Sammy Zielinski and Mike Scott to the NBA, those two guys were really key players for that team. Those two guys were, 2 out of the top 3 scorers and 2 of the top 3 guys who ate up a lot of minutes for that team. And I think UVA really has a whole new look to that team this year. And from our standpoint, last season we played UVA relatively early in the season. It was still kind of these guys on our team getting their feet wet with Coach Hewitt's system. We're still kind of learning. And really last season served as a learning experience all season long. For everyone, coaches and players.
Right. I think that a big advantage that Coach Hewitt has is that he came from Georgia Tech. And he coached ACC teams. He didn't necessarily coach against this UVA team for most of his career, but he knows the ACC style. He knows how teams adapt to the ACC. So to be able to bring in a team like Maryland and UVA, 2 ACC teams, is huge for Coach Paul Hewitt. So the player to look at for UVA on Friday is 6'6" junior guard Joe Harris. 11.3 points per game last season, 41% shooter from 3 and from field goals as well. He's certainly the guy that we need to watch out for.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Zielinski was, or rather Mike Scott was the leading scorer for that team last season. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not Joe Harris can really make the next step. See if he can take that next step and lead this team in scoring. If he can, UVA might have another NCAA tournament appearance on the way this season. If he can't, I look forward to seeing who's going to try to step up and fill that void left by Zielinski and Scott.
Yeah, I think that we match up extremely well with UVA, especially because we have so many returning members and they lost 2 big members. I think if you're not planning on coming to this game, you need to come to this game. The Patriots Center is going to be absolutely packed. I'm thinking full. I'm thinking to the brim full. We're going to see the Patriots Center.
I hope so.
I hope every game is packed brim to the full, but I think that's a little wishing there.
I also hope Sherrod Wright hits a buzzer beater at every game.
Right, but we can't wish for that. We're going to take another quick break here. As we mentioned earlier in the show, we've been teasing it the whole time. Cody and I are giving our 3 points to success coming up after this break. You don't want to miss it. Stick around. Back to the Courtside Seats preseason show here on Mason Cable Network or on the Courtside Seats website. Daniel Zimmet, this is Cody Norman, and we teased it all show. Now is the time for Cody and I to give our 3 keys to success for the Patriots this season. I'm going to start out with mine. My first one is limit the turnovers. We averaged 15.2 turnovers per game last year. We got to get that number under 11, in my opinion. We have young point guards in Brian Allen and Corey Edwards, but I think that this season they'll really be able to see those passes better and not be able to turn the ball over. My second one, take and make the 3. We shot 33% from 3-point range last season. Not a terrible number. But the terrible number was that we shot 132 less 3-pointers than opposing teams. I think Vertrell Vaughns is really a guy to look at this season. He was really hot 2 seasons ago, had a little bit of a cold streak last year, but can really step it up for the Patriots this year from 3-point. Finally, I think we need to win the rebound battle. We had a plus 2.3 margin on the boards last year. Copes and Arledge and Johnny Williams will really increase that number, but I think the key is to replace Morrison and Pearson on the boards to help increase that range.
Yeah, my 3 keys to success. Number 1, I think we really need to spread the ball, spread the score. Last year we averaged 70 points per game with the removal of or the loss of Pearson, Mike Morrison, and Andre Cornelius. We lost nearly half of our scoring. We can't fall into the trap of trying to replace a guy like Ryan Pearson or Mike Morrison with one player. This is going to have to be a score by committee, really a score by committee team this season. My number 2, win in the transition game. Coach Hewitt loves to run up and down the floor. He loves to play that really hard-nosed defense and get the ball pushing up and down the floor as fast as we can possibly get it. In 3 games last season against VCU, we were outscored 59-20 off of turnovers. So no surprise we were 1-2 against VCU. We were outscored 16-6 in our loss in Philadelphia to Drexel. We were outscored 10-0 on fast breaks in our final game at VCU, or rather in the CAA tournament to VCU last season. So that's something I think we're really going to need to zero in on, is a transition game. Number 3, attack the basket and get to the free throw line. More free throw attempts to me means that this team is being aggressive, that we're really trying to get to force, not force points, but we're really trying to get into the painted area as opposed to stepping back and taking those jump shots, stepping back and taking three-pointers. We talked about guys like John Arledge, Johnny Williams, guys who we know can shoot the basketball, but can they get in and fight in the paint? Last season we had 732 total free throw attempts, about 22 per game, but more than half of those were accounted for by Morrison, Pearson, and Cornelius. So more than half of our free throw attempts, more than half of our points accounted for by the seniors that are no longer here. By comparison, Drexel was at about 20 free throws per game, Delaware at 24 free throws per game. So if we can attack the basket and really get guys to the free throw line, have somebody replace Ryan Pearson in terms of aggressiveness, somebody replace Mike Morrison in terms of aggressiveness, I think this team is going to be in really good shape moving forward.
Well, Cody and I are gonna recap these points all season long. We'll touch on them in all preseason or pregame and postgame shows. Remember, you can listen to our pregame show on WGMURadio.com, and we'll be with you right here on Mason Cable Network and CourtsideSeats.onmason.com after every game. Special thanks to Jake McLaren, our producer for the show. For Cody Norman, I'm Daniel Zimmet. We'll see you Friday, everyone.